All right. Well, welcome. This is a wonderful topic, and hope we can do it justice today. First of all, I'm not familiar with panel members, so let's introduce ourselves. Richie, do you want to go first? Take a minute or so and tell us who you are.
Sure. My name is Richie Franklin, and I graduated a little too long ago in performance, and I after graduating went and worked in New York for a little while in theater, and then I went out to Los Angeles and worked for some time in Los Angeles on a couple feature films, and mostly in prop and design. And then I bought a small production company and shot several of my own films, and shot those here locally, mostly in southern Utah. And then I moved up here to Salt Lake probably about 15 years ago, and I've just worked in the industry in several different capacities, in front of the camera, behind the camera, and continue to do so to this day, mostly on commercial shoots, but occasionally on narrative films, feature films, those sorts of things.
Great. Okay, Stefan, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, my name is actually Steven, but that's fine. I have also worked on some film sets, doing various jobs, commercial and feature films. I also have a lot of experience just doing independent video production. My film work's been actually more of, I guess, the YouTube variety. My channel's had over 16 million views, just doing fun little videos with my family. I also have a lot of experience in theater. I run and own a theater company called Great Hall Theatrical Productions, and I create musical theater. That's kind of my day job lately. So it's been fun, from this angle of independent media production right here in Utah County, and having that perspective and seeing how it works. So that's my little intro.
The question is, can you make a living at that?
So far, so good. Yes.
Wonderful. That's one of my favorite sayings is, find something that you love, find a way to get paid for it, and then you never have to work a day in your life.
True.
And I've been very fortunate. I've been a writer, producer, director for about 50 years now. Produced the first student film at BYU that was ever done for class credit in 1971. A little campus romance called Ice Cream and Elevators, if you want to look for it on YouTube. And, I've worked in a number of different film and television in NBC, Burbank, work, TV station, public television production, several small film companies. So, just enjoyed, and our family's kind of going into the second generation. My daughter Tara is one of the best makeup artists in Utah. Kind of film family in that regard. So let's talk about Walden Media. I had the privilege of meeting Michael Flaherty. 12 down in LA, they had a conference called the Family and Faith-Based Entertainment Summit. Amazing experience. First of its kind, and then they had another one a year or two later, back again, and people of faith in Hollywood, which you'd think maybe only a half a dozen might show up, but there was hundreds of people there. The place was full in this big fancy hotel ballroom in Hollywood. We got to meet Michael. He was just a guy, approachable, very likable, very excited about doing family. Has anybody else had any personal experiences with Walden or Michael that you want to share?
So I haven't interacted directly with Michael personally, but I mean, if I were to talk about my personal experience with Walden Media, I've followed them since their early films were coming out, and just been impressed with, I don't want to use the term resilience, but the tenacity to continue, where several of these companies have started creating things, and then after maybe a flop or two, or something that didn't do so well, they pulled back out, and Walden has continued to deliver the films in the way that they want to produce them. I think it's phenomenal to watch.
Okay, for those that are not familiar, I had a list of some of the films that Walden has produced. The Holes, which is through Disney. Ray, are about Because of Winn-Dixie, Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, Charlotte's Web, Bridge to Terabithia, Mr. Gregorium's Wonder Emporium, Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, Waiting for Superman, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, let's see, The Giver, released through the Weinstein Company, Everest, Resurrection of Gavin Stone, which I believe that one was directed by Dallas Jenkins, that's doing the Chosen series. See, A Dog's Journey, Babysitter's Club is coming up. Any particular thoughts on any of those films that give us some insight into the
I think that I'll step into that as we kind of talk through some of this. I think it's interesting as you talk about partnering with larger houses like Disney to roll out some of their content, but then also the independent productions. I think that it's impressive to say, or to see that they've chosen to make films that they wanted to make. There is a bit of a veer from like typical Christian media. It's we're going to make wholesome family productions, and we've seen that sort of thing in Utah with feature films for the families and things like that. But them going out and grabbing some star power, getting The Rock into some of their movies, getting if I remember right, Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium had Dustin Hoffman and Natalie Portman, and being able to get some of these individuals to sign on to their productions, it adds that level of production quality, that feels like they invested in areas that brought up their game, so that it wasn't viewed as just independent productions, but as productions that wanted to be feature films. And that's what I think, to your point earlier, Robert, where you were talking about, you thought only 6 people would show up in Hollywood for, this faith-based film discussion, and seeing that there are a lot of people out there. There is an audience that wants to see faith-based, high-quality productions. And that's one of the things. And when I say faith-based, right, it's not necessarily we're turning to God, but we're not ignoring him in our productions. And I for me, there's so many that hit that that I just love.
I know when I attended this conference, one of the speakers was Dick Rolfe, who is the head of the Dove Foundation. The Dove Foundation gives Dove Awards to films that are inspirational and uplifting and sort of thing. And one of the things he said is that you have faith-based films, which are a bit more, I don't want to say preachy, but more direct, let's say. And then you have faith-friendly film, which don't necessarily have to have a preachy element or whatever, but who inspiring and uplifting and supporting, as well as being. Stephen, have you had any experiences with any of these films that we talked about, or thoughts about Walden that you want to maybe share with us?
No.
Okay. One of the things that I did learn from Michael Flaherty is that most of the films that Walden made based on books, and often children's books. And one of the seed questions they gave us was that how did Flaherty, with no film experience, help create some of the best movies? So one of the things that he said in his forum address at BYU, he spoke to the BYU student body in 2011. And I would encourage everyone to go and watch that. Go to BYU, watch that that talk that he gave. It's really, really good. And in it, one of the things that he said that he had grown up Irish Catholic in Boston, and he had wasn't quite sure what he wanted to do with his life. His some of his family members were attorneys, but he didn't do that. Anyway, he ended up decided that he wanted to make movies. And his only problem was he didn't know anything about making movies and didn't know anything about starting a company. One of the things that he did was he talked to his wife. She gave him a list of fourth grade books. She was a school teacher, and she gave him a list of books for fourth graders. Many of these that I mentioned on this list that Walden came from to find. It says, how did he do that? Well, he said that he got a couple of friends. One of his was an old friend of his that was out in Hollywood making horror movies. And, he wasn't happy doing that, and so got him to go with him, and said they went to a whole bunch of different investment and venture capital firms and turned down by every one of them. The last meeting they had was a fellow named Phil Anschutz in Denver. Gazillions of dollars through the oil industry, I believe. But anyway, he said yes. You got all these no's, and then he said yes. And he was willing to share their dream with them. And he said that they wanted to deal with books that spoke to the nature of faith. By the way, we will, to the audience out there, we will be answering some questions later on. And so go ahead and start typing those into the chat screen or whatever. And the producer is going to take note of those and share some of those with us later on. So I want you to be thinking of questions and go ahead and share those with us now. Don't wait till the very end. So anyway, he said that they wanted to deal with books that spoke to the nature of faith. And he had a quote from The Little Prince, the book where the fox tells the little prince, says, "Only the heart can see rightly." So I was very impressed with that aspect of Walden media. What are your thoughts, guys?
I think, and I'd be curious to hear. Thank you for sharing that story, Robert. I'd be curious to hear kind of Stephen's thoughts on this. If you've done a lot on YouTube, right, and built quite a bit that way, and now you're doing musical theater, there's a balance. I remember the first film I shot was with a friend of mine, and we had saved up money, and we had decided that we were going to go out and rent the best equipment we could get. And we were going to make this high budget film, and high budget for us, like we were right out of high school. And it turned out that we couldn't get enough money. And so we went and we found a VHS camera at the time. It wasn't VHS, it was a high 8. But we went and we shot, and we said, we've got to make a movie that's appropriate for the quality of film we're going to make. And so we made this kind of silly movie about two teenagers, which I don't think I even put on YouTube at any point. But I like the story about Flaherty going out to find investment, and there's a lot of perspiration that goes into the ultimate production of what we see in the end. And of course, everybody knows that, but the tenacity to go through and say, I've been turned down by all these investors, but ultimately I need money, I need funding that can help to get this going. And so creating quality entertainment, quality storytelling, but we live in an interesting world now where you can create things with a cell phone and a story with a cell phone that tells the story. So, and this is why I'd be curious, Stephen, to kind of get your input on when do I say it's great to shoot this with a cell phone and tell the story my heart wants to tell, and when do I say I need to go and get an investor because micro budget is $1 million+ for this film, and I need to go and get that money?
It's a good question. I think my answer would be when you have a good prototype or a pilot. From my experience with video production, I've never solicited funds. I have friends who have done it. I've seen people who have invested substantial amounts and usually broken even or taken a loss. And it's only gotten harder, I think. It's become increasingly easy to make films, but actually increasingly harder to get viewership, I think. There's kind of this inverse relationship as there's just so many studios and, the internet and YouTube, and there's just competition like never before in a lot of ways. From a theater perspective, it's kind of a different beast. So many fellow theaters I work with, theater companies, they're nonprofits, and they're always pursuing grants, looking for government sponsorships or different endowments of the arts in order to fund their passion project. And I've seen a lot of kind of misguided approaches toward that, in my opinion. First of all, it takes a lot of money to solicit these funds, and then they always comes with strings attached. You have to prove that you're incorporating all these different elements and that you're helping these demographics move up in society. And so it comes at the cost of creative control, and you're going to spend a lot of time and money and energy to try to get that money. And then, you lose the creative control of being the sole proprietor, as you are now accountable to a board. And I imagine it's similar in film as well. But for these reasons, I'm a fan of usually just bootstrapping it, doing benefit concerts, investing your own money, and proving a concept, starting minimalistically in the age of YouTube and all of this. It is a really good time if you can just start on a shoestring budget and, again, try to make a pilot. And if you can get a great proof of concept, then I think that would be a good time to take it to the next level and try to get investors.
One of the things that Michael said in his talk at BYU in 2011, and again, I encourage everyone to go and listen to that. He mentioned that at Walden they had made this, and I think, can't remember which, it was one of the Chronicles of Narnia films that they had done, spent all these millions of dollars, and they had made a trailer. They tons of money doing this really fancy trailer and everything. And he said that he came and visited BYU, and there was a couple of students there who had they had done a little promo for the BYU library. And when he talked about the big expensive trailer they had done, he said, "Oh, we got 850,000 views or whatever." And this one young lady, who a few of her friends, in one day had shot this thing at the BYU library. I think they're talking about the one that was kind of a parody on the Old Spice commercial. It was brilliant. It was well done. But he said that, they just put this thing together, and he was saying congratulations, day we got 1 million views or whatever, and in a couple of days we got 2 million views, and I think that's when he may have made the comment that the future, the best movie is not going to be coming out of. Anyway.
Yeah, I think one thing we learned from that is, again, in this age of hyper competition and YouTube, I think it's novelty that sells more than production quality a lot of the time. If you can have both, you've got the best of both worlds, but you can invest so much money and have the most amazing production quality, but if it's not novel, if it doesn't strike a chord, it's doomed to failure. And that actually is a major advantage for people, especially around here, where there's so much creativity and there's so much talent, and there may not be this huge backing or funding, but there's a lot of novelty. There's a lot of thinking out of the box, and that's what we need to see more of as we, try to build the industry locally, I think.
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. And you think of outliers like Napoleon Dynamite and some of those other kind of locally shot things that ended up really skyrocketing in terms of popularity, in terms of just reach. And I guess I go back to that first comment I made about Walden Media, about the thing that's been so impressive to me. And I'll be very upfront here. I've sat through a couple movies, I won't tell you which ones, and I got to the end of them and I thought, okay, this may be the nail in the coffin for Walden Media. And they come back and they make another one. And I love seeing that rock skip across the lake at the beginning of a movie, and I say, they're still there. They're making them. This is it's really exciting that they're making these movies, because we do see sort of this rise, and you can use the commercial for the library, and you can also use Napoleon Dynamite as examples of these sort of really fantastic things that get tons of viewership, but continuing to generate that content, to continue to do something without disbanding what you have and then bringing something new together is a hard thing to do. And I think that's one of the really admirable things about Walden, is that they do continue. And I think, going back to something Stephen said earlier about the prototype, and what you said, Robert, about that they took these children books and they did generally speaking, they did a good job of adapting that story that's so beloved to the screen. And so their prototype is, look, people love Journey to the Center of the Earth, or they love, Bridge to Terabithia is a classic story. And we've got Zoe Deschanel that's going to be, in the movie. And so we're going to tell this story, and it's going to be good. I was looking through some of the IMDb's of Walden earlier, and they don't have a lot of like 9.8s or, these things that just killed it out of the park, but it's constant, it's steady, and it's solid. I think of like T.C. Christensen, who same sort of thing. He's generating these films, and you meet him, and he's not necessarily trying to top Hollywood, but he's making movies that are making money, and that are allowing people to create and tell the story from their heart, like you were saying, Robert.
One of the things that I think has, like Stephen was saying, it's easier to make movies. I remember 35 millimeter film has a quality or resolution of about 2.3K. Well, for $139, I bought this little, Hero, what do you call it, knockoff that is, I can shoot 4K video with this little camera, And so there's been a democratization of the technical side of it. But the key is still the story. And this is one of the things that Michael said in his BYU talk. He said that, Jesus loved stories. So, the greatest messages that came to us through stories. And as Stephen said, we learn, we need to just find what people want, what's novel, what's something. And in one sense, Walden did this by relying on tried and true books that had done well. I know I worked back in the 70s, I worked for a company here in Salt Lake called Sun Classic. And they were unique as an independent film company. Most Hollywood films, 7 out of 10 don't make back their cost. Sun Classic, what they did was they would do a lot of market research prior to making film. They would get 200-300 ideas or concepts for a film every year, but they would take the ones the top ones. They would go out and they'd make a one-page synopsis of that, and then they had market research people who would go out in the malls or whatever and talk to people, and they'd have them go down this list of questions. Would you go out of your way, read this one page, and then would you go out of your way to see a movie based on this? And they had all these questions, and so they had this system worked out, and they could actually score a film, and based on what previous films had done that had similar stories, or they would then take the ones who scored the highest, and that's the films that they would make. And they made 4, 5, 6 films a year, and they never lost money on it because they did the research beforehand. I think if we get the right stories, and then we have the ability to make them, bring them to the screen faithfully, then we begin to have some success. What do you?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting and important thing to discuss as filmmakers, because it is expensive, even if it's just time, it's expensive, and so taking the time to make the investment beforehand to try and find something that you believe will be a commercial success is worth it. And it's an interesting balance between, and we're at LTUE, where there's tons of people that are writers that are here, right? And the idea of, you tell the story that your heart wants to tell. Oh, but by the way, you should tell something that's going to be commercial too. And that's a really hard sometimes balance to find. And it is very cool that we have independent publishing, we have independent filmmaking, where people can go out and say, I don't care what other people want, I'm going to make what I want to make. And there's a lot of value to that. But there is kind of what you're saying, Robert, this idea that you can be successful, you can make content that is going to hit pretty frequently, but it takes a lot of upfront investment in in market research and in understanding what it is. And that doesn't mean that you have to ignore the story that's in your heart. It just means if you've got 30 stories in your heart, you need to find the one that's going to let you tell the next story that's in your heart. by finding something that will be successful enough that it will at least inspire you to move on.
That was borne out by an occasion that, as part before they had the Sundance Festival, they had the Utah U.S. Film Festival. It was a predecessor, and I attended a panel back then where the head of our company, Sun Classic, was on it, and also Orson Welles. Orson Welles was known as being an auteur filmmaker, very, focused, seeing his vision, whatever. And so he basically, when Chuck was describing what Sun Classic did, Orson Welles said, "I'm not going to let a computer tell me what movies to make." So Chuck said, "Well, consider it this way: how many film ideas that you want to produce you have in your head right now?" "Well, maybe a dozen or so." So Chuck said, "Well, wouldn't it be nice for you to know which of those dozen stories that you want to make is gonna be successful at the box office, so that you can then make the others?"
Yeah, there's definitely this balance between passion and market demands, between the way things ought to be and the way things are. So when I was preparing for this, I was listening actually to another executive from Walden named Frank Smith, who I think he's the current CEO. And he was talking about how over time, the evolution of the film industry has had to adapt to all sorts of change. You've heard the classic movies versus the talkies that came out and how that devastated so many careers. Another big point in the film industry was the late 40s, following World War II, when the TV really hit the market. And the studio executives just hated the TV. They saw it as a passing phase. They saw it as a direct competition. And when it really started hitting hard, it was vehemently fought against, and some studios were going down, except for Universal. And that's where Universal rose to the limelight, because prior to that, they were just producing cheap horror films, like we've been talking about. And so they embraced the TV, and they started putting out all this great content, and that they rode that wave. And, a lot of things changed in 2008, not too far ago, when suddenly people stopped attending movie theaters. And to this day, the statistics are very different. People between 14 and 21 are no longer going to movies. It's the older timers that are going. And if you've been to a movie theater lately, you can probably remember it's not the same thing it was in the 90s, when there were dollar theaters and everybody was there, and it was this mass social thing. Now it's more for the hardcore film buffs, or it's more isolated than it used to be. And now, especially in just the last year, I think COVID has significantly changed the landscape once again, because suddenly you have this release window that is not even a thing anymore. Like Bill and Ted's new movie, it just premieres live and you watch it on Amazon or Netflix or something like that. Whereas if it had come out just a year or two before, it would have been all about the theater. And so this release window is changing. Everything is going directly to media. And there is a lot of revolution. There is a lot of adaptation happening around here. I have a lot of friends who have made movies that are on Amazon. Some of the ones I always see is recommended in my feed, I know are made by people here in Provo. So it is happening. There is a lot of adaptation, and that's the key. Like, if you don't adapt, you're not going to survive. And if we can continue to think out of the box and have something that's novel, we can make up for perhaps a lack of production quality. But ultimately, I don't know where it's going, because the money's not here. It's still in California. And so are we going to be able to meet that market demand and that quality with a vision? I don't know. Time will tell.
Okay, we're starting to reach a time limit here. I'd love to open it up to some questions, see what our audience out there wants is thinking about. We have some questions?
Yes, we do. Mexiviking, I hope I'm saying that right.
Hey, can you speak up a little bit? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. First question from Mexiviking is... Sorry, I have to do a little scrolling. What are your thoughts on movies like God's Not Dead, as opposed to some of the movies Walden has made? And do you think that those movies fulfill their intended objective, or do they just end up preaching to the choir?
Good question. I love God's Not Dead. I think that would certainly be, if we were to make a distinction, I think God's Not Dead is more of a faith-based film, whereas the Walden movies are more of a faith-friendly. So, character. I don't know about you guys, but I love God's Not Dead, and I thought it was very effective and entertaining. Also, God's Not Dead too. What do you guys think? Have you seen it, or?
I have. I have to agree to disagree. I think there was good intent behind it, but it didn't resonate with me. I found the characters flat and it very much preaching to the choir. I am more of a fan of the Walden Media approach. There's so much allegory in, say, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I feel that it shares the message of faith that they're trying to tell in a way that is not insulting to disbelievers, and it is at the same time inspiring and powerful for believers. And that's the style that really resonates with me.
Yeah, I think that your comment about faith-based versus faith-friendly is well taken. I know that I sort of shied away from the faith-promoting kind of. There was a kind of an evangelical movement to make, like, God is Not Dead, God is Not Dead 2. I didn't see Fireproof when it first came out, or Courageous. But Courageous, I think, was a phenomenal film. And when I say phenomenal, maybe I should walk that back. The quality, you can tell, is lower budget. And if it's accomplishing its purpose, I don't know that God is Not Dead is going to, which I enjoyed, right? But I don't know that it's going to convert a lot of people to that way of thinking. That said, I think it might help those who would choose to pick it up and watch it to examine their faith differently. And for me, Courageous was a movie like that, where I thought about fatherhood and faith after I saw it, differently. The faith-friendly is a different market altogether, in terms of, I feel okay putting this on with my family, and perhaps if I'm an individual of faith, I'm okay with the messages, knowing that it's most likely not going to be promoting extramarital sex, or something that would be out of harmony with the Bible, and so as an individual of faith, I appreciate that. And honestly, from an entertainment perspective, I would probably turn to that first, as opposed to, hey, it's family movie night, let's turn on God is Not Dead. But I might say this was an important film that helped me to better understand and address my faith. So I feel like it may not be. I've been in these production meetings where people are talking about what the influence of this movie will be. And I can imagine the production meetings where they were talking about, this is going to totally revolutionize Hollywood, and people are going to be, going to be joining. And there probably was some of that. But in my opinion, it's more for believers to better look at their own faith if they choose to watch it.
Okay, next question.
All right. Our next question is, you've mentioned that several of the Walden films were done in Utah. Do you think that... sorry. I had something stuck in my throat there. Do you think that this makes a statement about good films coming out of Utah? And if so, what kind of statement is that?
I don't really know which films Walden either.
I think so. So the question is, I guess, do we see quality films coming out more and more from Utah, or do we see production taking place more in Utah for filmmaking, if I understand correctly? And I would definitely say yes. There's just watching what's happened over the last several years, and Robert, you could probably speak to this even better. What's happened over the last many years is, and that's not a comment on your age, by the way. That was your comment of how long you've been in the film industry. But just seeing how many feature films are coming to shoot here. We're not shooting a lot of city slick thriller type things very much, but you certainly see a lot of kind of nature-based films. Wind River was shot here, but there were movies like Transformers looked at shooting in Utah. The coolest thing about Utah is you can be in the forest and you can be on the moon, and it's all here in Utah. Some of the most amazing landscape, and so I think as we begin to produce more and more here, that yes, and we've got a full studio built out in Park City, and so yeah, I definitely see a lot more filmmaking coming to Utah.
Comment, Stephen, or?
No, I just echo that. Yeah, there's a lot of jobs for film, and there has been for a while, and it's growing here in Utah for sure.
One of the things that I think anybody who's in filmmaking in Utah needs to protect their state legislators. Incentive bill that's in our Utah state legislature right now increase the amount of funding that is given as rebates to movie companies to encourage them. I think that right now it's limited to $7 million, expanded to 15. State of Georgia, where I grew up, right now it's really booming motion picture television because they don't have any cap. You get 30%. Made the industry there just explode. So do we have probably time for one or two more questions?
Yes, we have a question from Jimamani. What advice do you have for someone who has zero experience but wants to get into the film industry? What first steps should they take?
I was just listening to a talk on this, so
go ahead.
I'll chime in really quick, which is that there's a perception that you should be required to make a decent wage right when you start, and there's kind of a fear of slave labor in the form of internships. But I would just encourage you to not have that perception and to value experience and to value making impressions and learning before you demand compensation and position and credits. So what I'm suggesting is start with an internship. There's a lot of opportunities just to begin as a PA and to make connections and to show people your work ethic and to begin to understand the industry.
One of the first things I'd say is go be an extra on a film. Get on a film set. I mean, you get paid $100 a day, but you get to. It's like going to film school. You
get free food.
And you get paid for it.
And there's truth to that. I frequently tell people I know, I wish everybody had the opportunity to be on a feature film set just to see how it functions. Because it's like a whole little community that's working on this, and you've got, I tell my kids when we're watching maybe an intimate scene in a movie, I said, you don't realize this, but there's like 65 people standing there watching these people have this really, quiet moment together. And a lot of times they'll say, cut, we need to redo that again because of the camera work, not because the actors were terrible. But actors always think that that's the reason. But for breaking into it, I think that it's great advice to just find a way that you can participate in that, whether that's being a PA, whether that's being an extra, seeing what happens on film sets, and and then also participating in your passion, as we've talked about here, whether that's GoPro, whether it's a cell phone, whatever it is, you can start filming things and learning them now, but you will learn light years by actually watching people being on a set, and working, seeing how that like machine works is super valuable. I know before I started shooting my own stuff, that's what I did for quite some time. Was I was just backstage behind the camera, watching, in my opinion, some great directors and cinematographers and grips and all that kind of stuff doing their thing, and that helped me to decide how I wanted to do it.
And believe it or not, nowadays there are thousands of YouTube videos on film production and editing. You can learn an awful lot. Okay, we got to wrap this up. Steve, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Nope.
All I can say in summary is that I think Walden Media and Michael Flaherty, in some cases, blazed trails or in some ways and shown us all what can be done and set a good example for us. And so, for one.
Yeah.
So I guess we're done. Thanks for everybody for participating. Thanks for being here, and enjoy life, the universe, and everything.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Robert, Stephen, producer.